Welcome to my scientifically informed insider look at mental health topics. If you find this video to be interesting or helpful, please like it and subscribe to my channel. Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question asks if I can analyze David Icke's interview about the coronavirus. So we see this interview on a YouTube channel named London Real. And we see David Icke talks about the coronavirus and many of his conspiracy theories about what's going on with it. It's about a 45-minute interview. I'm only reviewing the part that's on YouTube. I'll provide a summary of Icke's position, what he expressed in this interview, and then I'll offer my analysis. David Icke, of course, is a real person, so I'm not diagnosing anybody here in this video, only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. So in this interview, we see no mention of alien lizard humanoids. I was extremely disappointed by this. I will still weave them into the narrative here at the end of the video, though. Now, we know that Icke used to maintain this idea of the alien lizard humanoids in one of his former positions, but he doesn't really have that now. So I don't know what happened to the alien lizard humanoids. I don't know if they just left, but either way, with his position now, we have this cult of human beings that wants to or already controls the world. He refers to this as a Hunger Games society that they're trying to create. So Icke looks at these conspirators as being in the top 1% in terms of wealth. 99% are dependent on 1%. And the police and the military kind of control the 99%. That's the idea. So the 1% controls the 99%. Scientists are among the people in this controlling class. There are some others as well. Icke mentions artificial intelligence a few times and how there's going to be this smart grid and this one world currency will come out, and these are all goals apparently of the conspirators. He talks about his problem, reaction, solution thing. I've heard this before from him. So this problem is created covertly, then the media kind of makes it seem worse or promotes it. There's this reaction of fear, and then a solution that moves the conspirators closer to their goal of world domination. Now, Icke says that if we don't know the outcome, everything is random. He mentions that in this video. But fortunately for everybody, I guess, right, he knows the outcome, right? He knows what's going on. So in terms of the coronavirus, David Icke does believe it's real. He believes that it was engineered to kill people who are medically compromised and who are elderly. He believes that everyone healthy kind of walks away from this. And of course, we know from the research so far that that's not really the case. Yes, it affects people with medical comorbidity and people who are older at a higher rate, but people who are younger can still die and have serious health consequences from coronavirus. We see David Icke maintains this position where we should never believe authority until proved otherwise. And I'll talk about how that proof never seems to come later on in the video. Icke claims that he had some symptoms and his son had some symptoms that really were very similar or identical to coronavirus. And from this, he draws only one of two conclusions: that he had coronavirus or he had something else with the same symptoms. He wonders why the world economic system is being destroyed by coronavirus, why governments are deciding to shut down businesses. He also predicted this pandemic and the economic crash. He believes the economic problems caused by the coronavirus will be worse than the consequences of the virus. This is one point where I actually may agree with him. Again, I'll talk about these when I get to the analysis part. We see he talks about electromagnetic soup, so radiation toxicity, and he believes this is what devastated the immune systems of the elderly. He believes that authority figures don't really care about elderly, and he has a lot of difficulty talking about what's going on in Italy. So he went from talking about Italy when a question was asked to talking about Iran. Then when he was moved back to the Italy question, he said they have a stronger strain of the virus. He essentially doesn't believe in coincidences. He blames the Rockefeller family for the flu pandemic, and he talks about some other kind of conspiracy theory areas like anti-vaxxers. Essentially, he says that the government is trying to promote what they say is good information and suppress what the government calls misinformation. All right, so he has kind of a lot of interesting positions that we see expressed in this interview. So now to move on to my analysis of this interview. So I've broken this down into many points. I'll go through these one by one. Let's start with the math that he uses here. Icke talks about the 1%. These are the conspirators. There are 7.7 billion people in the world. 1% of that would be 77 million people. So just for a comparison, the population of the United Kingdom is 66 million. That's a lot of conspirators. So I'm supposed to believe that 77 million people have entered into a conspiracy to control the world. Now later in the interview, he refers to the 1% of the 1%. Okay, so maybe he's not good at math, so we'll go with the smaller number. That's still 770,000 people. Seattle, Washington has a population of 744,000 people. 770,000 people have joined into this conspiracy to dominate the world. This would be just about impossible to maintain from a probability theory point of view. 770,000 people, and not one of them has delivered concrete evidence of this conspiracy. Not one of them had a bad day or got into an argument with a coworker and said, you know what, I'm going to expose this whole conspiracy thing, right? Nobody got mad at their boss because they didn't get a raise. No one got into an argument with one of the lizard people. Well, I just had to get that in somewhere, right? I'll get to that later. Again, he backed off the lizard people position. But either way, they didn't get into an argument with anybody, and they're all just kind of staying together. They're actually perfect conspirators. So again, from the point of view of probability and statistics, this just would not happen. Next point, he talks about the problem, reaction, solution. I've heard this before, as I mentioned. How is this different than what would happen without a conspiracy? So without a conspiracy, when there's a problem, people react to the problem by coming up with a solution. David Icke is not happy with this behavioral pattern, one that has existed for thousands of years. This is a great example of just taking something normal and finding something outstanding or unusual in it. I talked before about how David Icke handled the question of Italy. Here we see another logical error. The interviewer asked Icke what was going on in Italy, and Icke shifted to talking about how there had been a disproportionate number of deaths in Iran, and that this was part of a conspiracy including the United States. He really dodged the Italy situation altogether. Later on, we see the question comes up again, and he says that Italy has been infected by a stronger strain of coronavirus. Where does he get this information from? The latest report from Italy is that the strain has been isolated, but there's no indication of whether or not it's actually more dangerous. So David Icke just makes this up. Again, I don't know where he got this information from. If someday we find out that there was some sort of stronger strain there, Icke would likely take credit for predicting that. If it turns out that it's not a stronger strain, it's the same or weaker, we won't see him coming forward and saying, you know what, I got that wrong. Let me reconsider a number of my theories. I believe that would be an unlikely occurrence. Next point, he says that we should not believe authority until proved otherwise, right? So this is extreme distrust being manifested. So I understand it. David Icke would have us distrust authority, but trust him. So in a sense, he's become an authority among conspiracy theorists. So does that mean that he can't be trusted anymore? Right? There's just a logical problem with how he approaches this. The question he fails to answer is, what is the basis for trust? What makes anybody trustworthy? What we typically find with conspiracy theorists is that no evidence is sufficient to change their minds, right? So no matter what's introduced, nothing will cause a modification of belief. The next point, I talked about him and his son having those symptoms, and he drew those two conclusions. This is a great example of a failure to apply logic. First, he boxes himself into only two possible conclusions. Is it possible he could have imagined the symptoms? He didn't cover that potential conclusion. It's strange that somebody so high in openness to experience, so creative, would not consider this as a possibility. Then we see that from that conclusion that he came to, we shouldn't believe the statistics that are published on the coronavirus. How does that naturally flow from his analysis of the symptoms? Right, so there's a logical disconnect. He's talking about physical symptoms he experienced, and then he moves to not believing what the government said about the virus. It's a huge leap that, again, is a disconnect. Next point, David Icke predicted the pandemic and economic crash. Pandemics and economic crises have come and gone with some regularity throughout history. At any time, if they are predicted, the person making that prediction will eventually be correct. I think one reason David Icke might say things like this is to make this argument that he's credible because he predicted something accurately. Almost like the scientific method predicts something that could happen, right? Like an experiment's run and it could predict something. That's a strange parallel, right? So he's anti-science, but he's essentially trying to make himself appear credible, like science is credible. The next point, he indicates the economic difficulties might cause more damage than the virus, right? There might be more loss of life. So here's a rare point where I agree to some extent with David Icke. The economic suffering may actually cause a greater loss of life than the virus. These are tough decisions that countries are making in terms of how to slow the spread of the virus so the healthcare system can keep up. Any possible decision will have consequences. There's no decision that has a perfect outcome. So this is an interesting point that he makes. And again, he could be correct here, but it's not tied to a conspiracy theory. Now moving to the electromagnetic soup comment that he made about how this devastated the immune systems of the elderly. Immune systems become less efficient with age. Even before we knew what immunity was, we knew that as people age, they more easily fall victim to illnesses that would not have affected them when they were younger. This particular theory that electromagnetic radiation is responsible for this decrease in immune functioning is actually a fairly prominent belief among conspiracy theorists. Next point, David Icke indicates that authority figures do not care about the elderly. The reason I bring up this point is because this really speaks to how he tries to go after people's feelings. He doesn't know that they don't care. It's very easy to say that somebody else doesn't care. It plays on the feelings of the public. It's a quick thing to put out there that may resonate with a lot of people, but it's purely emotional based. He doesn't have evidence that somebody cares or does not care. He just throws these things out, I think, just for that emotional effect. Next point, David Icke indicates that coincidences aren't really coincidences at all, that somebody's behind it, making things happen. This is the whole not believing coincidences narrative. I've heard this many times before. It's fairly consistent with the idea of not believing that something could be random. The problem with this philosophy is it invariably leads to conspiracy theories, right? So this is one of the traps that conspiracy theorists fall into with their thinking. Moving on to the next point, we see that David Icke indicates that the government is promoting what they think is good information and suppressing him, essentially. Here's what I hear when David Icke says this. I am promoting false information, and I am mad that people are stopping me. Something else I hear when he says it, because they are stopping me, they are part of a vast conspiracy. This is simply a failure to take responsibility for spreading nonsense. It would appear that David Icke wants his point of view to be promoted and the expansive work of scientists and other professionals to be discarded. Right? There's no reason his work should be promoted over theirs. It's just what he wants. So moving to some other thoughts I had in terms of this interview, I think it's actually quite impressive how Icke memorized this whole theory. Like, he really puts a lot of time into this. It's clear that he reads a lot. He was up on current events. He pays attention to the news. I think his conclusions don't make any sense, but he clearly learns at a fairly quick pace, right? So that is impressive. We see that he feeds off emotion. I mentioned this before. Icke restores a sense of control and certainty to people. If one were to reject his conspiracy theory about coronavirus, one would have to accept that there is a dangerous pathogen that will end some people's lives. Many will be powerless to stop it. That's a terrifying feeling. In some weird way, people feel better because David Icke gives them hope. Things may be bad, but he's figured out for people what's going on. He's given them some sense of control and certainty. Conspiracy theories actually cause a lot of harm. Some conspiracy theories may be considered harmless, but we know that they are associated with negative social, health, and civic outcomes, including decreased pro-social behavior and an increased willingness to accept violent behavior. Now, of course, this comes from scientific literature, which conveniently is often dismissed by many conspiracy theorists. Everything that can possibly happen and everything that has happened can fit into a conspiracy theory. If a high-profile politician came out today and said, you know what, I'm actually an elite lizard, mind you, not an ordinary lizard, and I've been taking control of the planet, and I'm very sorry, I had a rough childhood on my lizard planet. The other lizards made fun of me in school. My self-esteem never really developed. Taking control of this planet was just my way of expressing rage at myself. I'm going to get in my spaceship now and head home, right? So somebody said all that, some politician. I get the sense that David Icke would still not be satisfied, although I think it's likely he would take credit for predicting that speech. I guess my point here is there wouldn't be relief. There's nothing that can disprove the conspiracy, and there's nothing that can satisfy the conspiracy theorist. So I'll wrap up on this note. When I was listening to David Icke talk and go through all these different reasons why the coronavirus was created and why it was deliberate and the government released it and all this, I was thinking, this guy certainly knows everything. And then I was thinking, if he were to say that, it would come out like, I certainly know everything. I-C-K-E. Icke. What are the chances of that? Could it just be a coincidence? Who knows? I know whenever I talk about conspiracy theories, there will be a variety of opinions. Please put any opinions and thoughts in the comment section. They always generate an interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found my analysis of this topic to be interesting. Thanks for watching.